being here today. We have a lot of information to share with you on reporting income. This is Reporting Income Part 2, part of the CPAP Redetermination series. We provided our module on Reporting Income Part 1 on April 4th. So we encourage everybody that missed that module to go back and listen to that recording. There'll be materials shared during that presentation. This information is found on group site under trainings. This training will be recorded and available to you as a resource. So if I believe it is already being recorded. I do see that recording in progress. We do have a full house today. We want to have a little bit of time to do Q&As towards the end of the presentation. So let's go ahead and get started with introductions. All right. So I'll be one of your trainers this morning. My name is Rosa Armenta. I am a Regional Outreach Coordinator for the Northeast region with the Community Partner Outreach Program. And my colleague and your other trainer is Sean. So Sean, please introduce yourself.
Good morning, guys. My name is Sean Snyder. I'm a Regional Outreach Coordinator for the Metro region, so for Multnomah and Clackamas County. Excited to be here and do a joint presentation with Rosie and some of our other folks on the call today. So thank you for being here, and thank you for taking the time. I know you all are super busy, and I always appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Sean. We also have some of our wonderful subject matter experts in the room from our policy team joining us today. Who are going to be assisting us in answering questions. I also wanted to mention that we have a lot of folks joining us today as well. So please be patient with us as we might not be able to address your question. However, if it's not addressed, we are going to be working on creating a Q&A and providing that during our follow-up email. So Christy Garland. Snahi Taylor.
Good morning. This is Christy Taylor. I'm a medical eligibility policy analyst.
Good morning. I'm Janelle White. I'm a policy analyst with Aging and People with Disabilities and the non-MAGI programs.
Great. And I think Yer was going to be joining us today. Unfortunately, she will not be able to join today. And we're going to be waiting on Christy later this morning. So, and again, as I mentioned, we have a lot of folks joining us today. Your questions are welcome, but if they go unanswered, just know that we're going to be working on a Q&A and providing that information during our follow-up email. And we have a full agenda as well. So if we can go to the next slide.
Wait, Rosie?
Yes?
Can you hear me? I'm so sorry. This is Christy Garland. I was having audio issues, but I'm here now. But since we're still on the slides, can I introduce myself real quick?
Oh, hello, Christy. Welcome. Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you. I apologize that I was late, but I'm having some technical difficulties. My name is Christy Garland. I use she, her pronouns. I'm not on camera, obviously, but I identify as a white female with long brown hair. And I am a policy analyst for the HSD medical programs. We also our programs are sometimes referred to as the MAGI programs, in case you're more familiar with that terminology. And I'm really happy to be here to support you all. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christy. It is really wonderful having you guys here, assisting with those questions on the questions box. And as I mentioned, we'll be working on a Q&A, providing that Q&A follow-up during our follow-up email. And if we can go to the next slide, we're going to have a agenda. So this is what the agenda looks like for today. We will start with GoToWebinar tips. We will provide a high-level redetermination renewal process that started this month in April. Some new and returning medical policies. We will also be doing a high-level overview of self-employment, deduction expenses, how to assist our members in entering this information in the applicant portal as accurately as possible. Sean will be providing us an overview of the annual income And we will also be providing a brief overview on responding to those requests for information, those RFIs. We will have hopefully some time to do a Q&A, and then we'll be sharing with you all past and upcoming webinars. And with that being said, let's go ahead and walk through some tips on how to use GoToWebinar. So for those folks not familiar with GoToWebinar, you are going to see an orange arrow like the one on the screen. Once you click that arrow, it will open up a side panel that will give you options to download the handouts. One of those handouts is the slide deck that we'll be going over today. Feel free to download it, take notes as we go. We ask that you utilize the questions box to ask your questions, and please feel free to ask your questions throughout the presentations. They are welcome. And if anyone is having any technical issues during this training with audio, can you please let us know in the questions box? We will try our best to see if we can help you with that. And with that, let's go ahead and jump to some redetermination overview.
Oh, hey, Rosie, just one thing real quick. Did you mention the handouts and that folks can download those? I apologize if you already did.
Yeah, I did. So there's two handouts. One of the handouts is going to be the slide deck that we're going to be presenting today. So if you were able to find them, you'll have two of them. You can download both of them. But the slide deck that we have provided you, you can download it, print it out if you need to, and it's good to take notes as we go through the presentation. And yeah, so there's two handouts, I believe. All right, wonderful. So we won't be spending a lot of time on this topic, but we wanted to briefly touch on it as it is part of the redeterminations renewal process. So if we can go to the next slide. So again, as you guys know, due to the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, it gave us certain flexibilities for individuals to stay on the Oregon Health Plan during the public health emergency, even if they might have been ineligible for it under certain circumstances. So starting April 1, just this month, as requested per the federal government, all states are starting to do redeterminations as we begin to exit the public health emergency period. And with this, Oregon must begin medical renewals for more than 1.4 million individuals who are on OHP. And if we go to the next slide, it's going to give us a timeline of renewals. So this is a quick reminder, this interactive tool has been included in the handouts, and we'll make sure to provide that with our follow-up email. So this is handout number 2 that you should be able to see on your handouts section. And this is just a visual of length of time we're giving a member as much time and leniency as possible to help them with this redetermination renewal process. As you already know, we have started our first batch of redeterminations in April. This is a high-level overview. If anyone needs to take action, provide more information, Oregonians will be informed that they need to do what they need to do or keep or to change to keep their coverage. OHP enrollees will have 90 days to submit information to redetermine their eligibility for OHP. People who are no longer eligible for OHP will receive a 60-day closure notice. And we wanted to make sure that you know that the marketplace will contact individuals no longer eligible for OHP to advise of coverage options through the marketplace. So for example, let's say folks in April will have until July to respond to the notice. But if they don't respond by July, they will still have 60 more days of benefits. We will start the closure process and their benefits would end by the end of September. However, they will have a 90-day window called reconsideration period, where the member can contact the state or community partner to get their benefits reopened as long as they provide the information that we're missing. And I don't know, I haven't looked at the chats, but is there any questions about the timeline of renewals? I know Sean had an extra document if there was questions around that.
I don't see anything yet.
I don't see any, so great, perfect. All righty. So So let's go ahead and go into what's new and what's returning on policies after April 1. So for section 2, we are going to look at new and returning policies after April 1. So we will be resuming medical benefit closures for those members that are found to be over the income limit or those over the resource limits. For those with non-response to requests for information, non-response to renewals, as well as dependent child not receiving minimal essential coverage. So these are the reasons we would be looking into medical ending medical benefits. Also, what is returning is income verification may be required when the one cannot verify income using electronic resources. This income verification has started on April 1. Now with this income, RFIs are going to be considered soft pens, which means that applicants may still receive benefits prior to us verifying income information. So let's dive into income and how income is used to determine eligibility. So as we have started with the redeterminations, renewals, we will be seeing RFIs for income verification. We want to provide this training to provide you with the tools to feel, so for you to feel comfortable with entering income into the system and to also know the type of information we will be looking for once an RFI is generated for that member. There are several medical programs the one system considers when determining eligibility for an individual. So if we can go to income, how income is used to determine eligibility right here. So now these programs have their own rules about which income is countable and who is accountable for. For example, some of these factors include their relationship, the tax filing status, the age of individuals in the eligibility group. Remember, we want to enter all income sources, whether we think it should be counted or not, and let the system determine that for you. Let the system determine if that income is going to count for that person's eligibility. When entering income, we must also remember to use the gross amount instead of the net amount. So if we can go to the next slide on tips when gathering information on income. So as we work with applicants on helping them apply for medical, we want to talk about the need for income information before the application. We want to prepare them to think about, ways if they have any type of verification to provide, or how they can have that conversation with you of what they're currently making. There are different types of questions you can ask to gather this type of information to help applicants in sharing with you and providing their income information. So some of these questions we have here that could lead that conversation are you currently working? Did you bring proof of income? How often are you paid? Is your income consistent or does it vary? We also want to ask if they have had any other jobs this year as well, as this will assist you in estimating their annual income. So on the next slide, we're gonna today, as I mentioned, we are here for self-employment income, and we're gonna go ahead and today we're going to cover self-employment income, and we do encourage you to listen to our past module on earned income located in group site under trainings. So self-employment income is received directly from an applicant's own business, trade, or profession, rather than earning a salary or wages from an employer. The individual is working in a business on a regular basis to support their livelihood and typically includes business costs or expenses, though they are not necessarily or required. Individuals are considered self-employed if they are considered an independent contractor by the business that employs them. For example, driving companies. And we're going to be talking about a scenario where someone is applying for medical benefits and they happen to be an Uber driver. So if we can go to the next slide, it'll give us some examples of self-employment situations. So we have real estate agents, those folks selling Avon, Mary Kay, Party Light, Pampered Chef, selling blood plasma, collecting and redeeming cans and bottles, picking mushrooms, collecting firewood, picking brush, owning a business, independent consulting or contractors. Again, those delivery jobs that we often see now, Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Grubhub, Instacart, Amazon Flex driver. Those folks picking mushrooms, moths to sell, doing odd jobs for money, rental income. And let's say you are assisting someone with OHP who works as an Uber driver and they are not sure if their income is considered earned or self-employment. How can you assist if someone comes to you and tells you, I'm an Uber driver, but I'm not sure if that's counted as earned income or if it's counted as self-employment income? So on the next slide, if you are unsure if it's earned income or self-employment income that the member is currently receiving, there is a tool within the One Applicant portal in the income section. It might look like a hyperlink, but it's the section that reads, I'm not sure, help me decide. Once you click that, so if you click that, if we go to the next slide, it will walk you through some questions to help you and the member decide whether their income is earned income or self-employment income. The example we have provided you here, this person has self-employment income, they don't receive a W-2, they don't pay federal income taxes or it's deducted from their paycheck, or employer does not cover them through their through liability or workers' compensation. So again, this tool serves as a way to help folks determine if their income is earned or self-employment income. This scenario, like I said here, we found that our applicant has self-employment based on the answers that they provided around their employer or the income that they're receiving currently. Any questions so far that you would want me to go ahead and stop, Sean, or?
There are a few questions that have come through. I'm not sure if they pertain always to self-employment at this time. So if not, we might want to wait until the Q&A to answer some of them, but there are definitely some great questions coming through. And I do encourage folks, even if your questions don't pertain to self-employment and you just have a question you want answered about income, please put it in here and we'll do our best if we can answer it, either during the Q&A or during a follow-up as well with an FAQ. But other than that, I don't see anything quite yet.
Thank you so much. All right, so we are moving forward and with the next slide. All right, self-employment income. If you joined us in our last module on reporting income part 1, we worked with Olivia in determining her variable work hours and income. We are bringing back Olivia and she's now reporting self-employment. So if we can go on to the next slide really quickly, thank you. So when working with an applicant on submitting information, there are various ways we can help applicants provide income references. So those records to help code that information correctly and accurately in the One Applicant portal. Again, self-employment income should be reported even if the applicant does not file taxes. Now, if you are working with a member that they have self-employment income and they do file taxes on that income, we want to make sure that that income from the previous year is reflective of what they are currently making right now. A couple scenarios with that. If it's consistent and not much has changed, that's great. We can use that tax information from the previous year. However, if the income has significantly changed, we do want to make sure to work with the applicant on looking for the other ways to submit their income information. So so that way it is coded accordingly and accurately in the applicant portal of what they're currently working for that month they are applying for benefits. And anytime we're working with self-employment income, we must enter self-employment expenses and deductions in the self-employment income detail screen, as shown in the next slide. So this screen is going to ask you for self-employment expenses and deductions. It's going to ask you the income category, which will provide you with the drop-down menu. It's going to ask you for the business name, the anticipated work hours per frequency, frequency of income and expenses, whether they are paid weekly or biweekly, gross income per frequency, self-employment expenses. As you will notice, the expenses are going to be entered multiple times, 3 times to be exact, for folks with self-employment income. And if we go to the next slide, the system will ask you other questions similar to other income sources of when the job started, are they currently working, or have they stopped working, along with the start and end dates. These questions is just to try to gather as much as information of their current income and employment status. Sean will go into more detail about those deduction and expenses further in the training. But in the meantime, let's go over self-employment examples. I will give the mic over to my colleague, Sean, to go over that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rosie. And I see our awesome subject matter experts are starting to answer questions for folks. So again, feel free to keep adding those as we go through. We'll do our best to answer those questions. And I see some really great ones coming through that I think are really important for all of us to learn more about and to have on our radar. So as Rosie said, we're going to be doing this a self-employment example. There is a particular type of independent contracting work that I feel like a lot of community partners have had questions about, and so there's a million different examples we could do for self-employment, but we chose to go that route. And as Rosie had mentioned, we are bringing our lovely Olivia back as a independent contractor. She comes to get and to apply for medical benefits. She lets you know that she is an Uber driver and works part-time Wednesday through Sunday from 3 to 8 and roughly gets about $11.75 per hour plus tips. So we're going to do a kind of a quick example, some quick questions, and a little bit of a role play on how we would go through about collecting this information as well. So when we're talking to Olivia and we ask her, hey, Olivia, do you have any information that you can provide to us? We were able to pull kind of an example of what, say, from someone's phone, they might have as a total earnings for Uber. And this will be similar for a lot of the driving companies. So for DoorDash, Lyft as well for folks that are in the metro region, DoorDash for folks that are maybe outside of the metro region and don't have some of the driving companies. So Olivia shows us at least one of her pay stubs. This is just an example, and we see that she, for 1 week, made about $749.43. As we covered in our last training, and we're not going to spend as much time focused on the math because the math can be very particular to every single situation. So, but as we've asked in our previous example in our last training earlier this month, we want to make sure to check with Olivia to look at multiple earning statements to see if there is fluctuating income, is their income consistent. So we work with Olivia on that, and we ask her, hey, Olivia, can you show us some of the, here's your most recent, but can you show some that are been in the past? And we see that she has quite varied income. So 1 week it's $545, next it's $600, and $586. So since her income does vary, one thing we're going to want to do is help to create or help calculate and work with Olivia to calculate an average self-employment gross income. And just to make sure for folks, when you're working with someone in this particular situation, we do want to gather the gross amount. So that's going to be that $749.43 versus just the fares. We want to include any other surges, tips, or anything else that they're getting for that income as well. So if you were to take all of their pay stubs, add them together and divide by 4 weeks of earnings, we get an average weekly gross income about $620.11. So this is just a kind of a quick example of how you could help someone calculate their gross income for, say, like a contracted work position. And then I was going to do a little bit of role play with Rosie, if she's willing to play Olivia with me. Just on one thing that I found when I was a community partner application assister is that a lot of times folks may not recognize or realize that expenses for their business or their independent contracted job is allowed to be deductible, and folks may not be keeping really clear records. And so helping folks with that conversation and helping gather that information can be really, really helpful. Let's go through a couple of these questions. So Olivia, how long have you been working as an Uber driver?
I started in June of 2022.
Okay, perfect. That's super helpful. And do you file taxes?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great. That'll help us hopefully collect some extra information. So with Uber driving, did you know that it's considered self-employment? When you're an independent contractor, we can actually count any expenses that you have for your work. Do you keep track of your expenses?
What kind of expenses count?
Let's see. So those are going to be any kinds of items that you use to conduct or maintain your business as an Uber driver. Anything that you use to say maintain your car. Do you feel like you might have any expenses that fit?
Yes, I do. I have expenses for gas, car insurance, car registration.
Perfect. Anything else, any other maintenance or anything else that you're doing to kind of maintain cleanliness of your car, anything else?
Well, I also pay for vehicle maintenance, car washes, detailing, oil, items for customers like bottled waters, candy, snacks, and actually my phone bill.
Okay, perfect. That makes sense. Using your phone as well in order to use the Uber app. Okay, so that's great. Thank you so much for all that information. So with kind of talking people through that example, you'll want to work with folks to help them calculate an average expense to put in the One Applicant portal. And as we saw earlier, and we'll show a quick example of it, we'll want to make sure that we're putting in our expenses for self-employment at the same frequency or pay frequency as the gross income. So say we've got examples here of some of those expenses. We sit down and spend some time working with Olivia. We calculate an average gas, average car insurance spread over a weekly amount, car registration, maintenance, items for a customer, so any of the snacks, bottled water, and her phone bill. And we calculate a rough average for her of about $300 weekly. Again, it's going to be one of those things that you're going to want to double check with clients when we're helping them when they have complex situations. Double check with them, say, hey, does this sound about right for your average? As we know, these things will fluctuate quite a lot for folks as well. Okay. So I just want to pause because I can move pretty quickly and I don't want to move too fast. Do we have any questions that kind of came up with the self-employment example of how to have that conversation with someone, how to collect that information, and how to help enter it into, and we'll show how to enter it into the system here on the next slide.
We have great questions on the chat, but nothing, not a question related to the conversation or how the calculation for her average weekly gross income.
Perfect. So yeah, I saw Daniel's question there about the phone bill, and I'll just be clear, guys. We did make up these numbers, so of course it's going to be specific to everybody. But because we are entering her income as weekly, we're going to want to work. Oh, I just realized, Rosie, that is the most expensive weekly bill in the world. So I apologize, guys. Yes, so probably would be a little bit of lower for the weekly amount. Rosie and I were going through these calculations to try and figure out a good average weekly amount. So yes, it probably would be a little bit lower for the phone bill, but yes, it's supposed to be a weekly amount. I apologize about that. And Cecilia, that's a really great question. And, maybe we can ask one of our subject matter experts, Christy Garland or Christy Taylor or Janelle, for when folks are trying to figure out so say for their phone bill, I know that sometimes folks may only be able to count a portion of their phone bill, and I'm not a tax preparer, so I don't know 100% of what they would be able to claim. If the person's unsure of what they're able or allowed to claim, would we want to direct someone to try and connect with a tax preparer to have that conversation about what they're allowed to deduct for their self-employment?
Hey, this is Christy Garland. Certainly we can do that. We can also help them navigate to the IRS website.
Great.
I know that neither of those are always the perfect answer or very easy, because I sometimes have to weed through the IRS site myself. And so I'm just acknowledging that some of the information on there, it can be hard to understand, but that is what we would recommend, is that they, obviously the IRS website is free, whereas a tax preparer might not be. But those are the things that we would offer.
Okay. And would, because I know that one thing that we had talked about in our previous conversation is not necessarily wanting to hold up an application. So would it be okay to gather the information that, say, Olivia has right now, and then encourage for them to continue with their, keeping their records, double checking with someone, and double checking with the IRS to make sure everything's, if there's any changes or any other modifications that you need to make down the line, or what would be your thoughts there? If say Olivia was unsure of what she could count.
Well, we wouldn't want to encourage her to, we would not want to list an amount she found was questionable. So if she's like, well, I pay $85, but I'm not really sure how much I would claim on my taxes for that.
Okay.
We wouldn't want to enter an amount that she's not sure of.
Perfect. Okay.
So I think probably in that instance, I don't know how it works for every community partner, and I assume that it's different. Each community partner has unique scenarios and situations and like places of work and how they set up appointments and are talking and meeting with people. So if it works out where they can, maybe Olivia can do that research right then. Okay, yeah. Maybe the community partner helps her use I don't really know. I'm kind of, throwing out different ideas. I don't think that she necessarily has to, go away and come back when you have that.
Okay.
But we wouldn't want her to give an amount that she wasn't, fairly confident about, that that's what she would claim on her taxes.
Perfect. Okay. No, I think I think that's perfect. I really appreciate that, Christy. Cecilia, does that help? I know some of these, especially with some of our income questions and concerns, they're not as straightforward as we would like. So yeah, as much as you can help folks as well, that's wonderful. Whether you can help them in that moment or help direct them to some resources, and maybe we can think about putting together resources as well for self-employment. I saw that Ahmed as well gave a really great example of using TurboTax. So folks that might have either done their taxes or have access to TurboTax, that they can kind of quickly go through that process or have those records of what they've been able to claim in the past. So that's a great example, and I really appreciate that as well, Ahmed. All right, guys. I know this is a complex thing. I'll go ahead and move us forward just in interest of time. And if there's anything else that we haven't had a chance to cover, we'll come back to it in our Q&A. But great questions, guys. I really appreciate them. Okay, so with our example with Olivia, for income category, so she's considered an independent contractor through Uber. So independent contractor, business name, Uber driver, or you can say Uber. I guess, however it would appear on their earning statements would be best. So she had told us roughly what her work frequency was. So we want to make sure to put in those hours of roughly what she's working per week. We had weekly earning statements that we were able to work with. So we earlier did that average weekly income of $620.11 and self-employment expense per frequency of $300. We asked Olivia if she had started her job prior to July. The answer was yes to that. And I apologize. If you're doing the application right now, I would ask, have they done the application prior to April, of course, because we know that the system would adjust for that particular application. And we know that she's still currently working, so she hasn't taken a pause, and her self-employment hasn't ended. So hopefully that is kind of helpful on how you would add that in. And you would get an income summary. If, of course, we worked with Olivia and we found out if there are any other income sources, or if that was just Uber, she doesn't have any other types of income. So we have the independent contractor work for Olivia Lucas. It shows us $620.11 for her income and expenses of $300. What I really suggest is that you guys make sure to write down the income amount and expense amount that you guys have calculated in the frequency, because you will need to add the income again for the annual income page, and the expenses you will actually be entering 2 more times. So self-employment expenses, just as a reminder, get entered 3 times throughout the application, once during the self-employment income, during deductions, which we'll show you later, and again during annual. So it's really helpful to make sure to keep track of that information and work with clients to help them with those calculations if they need that support. Major key takeaways is we want to try and get as accurate information as possible, regardless of what their income source is. It's okay to ask questions. If they don't have 100, pay stubs or things that show exact amounts, work with them as best as possible to try and collect that information and support them in doing that. Help point them in directions of different tools. If, say, like we were saying, Olivia isn't 100% sure what expenses she can claim, we want to make sure we try and get that as accurately as possible, but we also don't want to be creating barriers. So support, as I know you guys always do, support your community members as much as possible when you're helping them apply for benefits. And we recognize that it is not as clear cut as we would like it to be. Folks have lots of variable income, multiple types of sources, so do the best you can. And again, as always, reach out to your rocks if you have questions. We're here to support, and we can always connect with our policy team as well. Okay, so we're going to dive into reporting expenses and deductions. So I know have kind of boiled down the application to the different places in which self-employment income is going to be added. I want to make sure as we're going through these sections that when you're doing the application, you would be, of course, asking community members about all of the types of expenses and deductions that are allowable within an application. So this is the kind of gateway screen, or the screen that you guys would come to in the One Applicant portal when you are looking at expense information. It's going to ask about medical expenses, child support expenses, alimony, education expenses, and deductions. As always, there are the little question mark boxes that you can click on that can help provide extra information if the person is unsure. For today, just in interest of time, we're going to focus on deductions and where you would be putting self-employment expenses in the expense deduction section. All right, so and folks, let me know too if there's any questions that are coming through that we want to make sure to follow up with. It looks like there's a question on some proof for self-employment, so let me know if you want to cover that in RFI or if we want me to cover it now. So for the deduction section, we would want to help a community member put in any deductions that they are able to claim on their taxes, regardless of whether they're going to be filing taxes. So even if they're not going to file, if it's a deduction that could be claimable or would be claimable if they were to file taxes, we would want to make sure to gather that information, help the client enter that information accurately. And again, as I mentioned, this is also where you're going to be putting self-employment expenses. In this tax deductions expense area, this is where we'll put in Olivia's self-employment expenses. So as you can see in the drop down for deduction type, it says self-employment expenses. We put in $300 weekly, roughly when she started doing this work and she had these expenses and how often, and I'll have a deduction summary similar to the piece there. One thing I do want to cover is that there are some other deductions. So even for folks that are have employer statements and receive pay stubs, they may have other pre-tax deductions. So if they have a health plan through work and it's a pre-tax deduction, there are other things that we are able to put down here under other allowable tax deduction expenses. And we can spend some more time talking about these in detail at a later time. But just make sure to ask folks as we're going through these if they have any other these types of tax deductions. For, of course, with our example with Olivia, we found out that she just has her self-employment expenses and doesn't happen to have any of these others. So we go ahead and add that deduction and leave in that summary there.
Hey, Sean, I have there's a question. So would it be, I'm thinking that they're referring to the tax deductions and expenses. Would it not be from tax returns only? So I'm thinking the question goes around like, would they need to provide tax returns in order to code tax deductions and expenses on that member's case? And the answer is no, they don't need to provide a tax return. So if you go back to the other slide that you were just presenting, if a tax deduction is considered or would have been considered if the member is filing taxes, it would go here. So they don't necessarily have to file taxes in order for the tax deduction to be counted on the deduction section for that member. I don't know if that answers your question. I know you also had another question about self-employment expenses. Self-employment expenses are unbelievable. What is acceptable? So I go from tax returns. Again, you will see people that do file tax returns, but there's some folks that do not file tax returns, and we do not want to turn people away if they're telling you that they're not filing tax returns, and instead having that organic conversation as to, you know, providing ledgers or any other type of income verification to assist them in verifying what their income is for that month. And if you want to add anything else, Sean.
No, that's perfect. I was just going to look to the policy team if there's anything else they wanted to add. I thought that was great, Rosie. I really appreciate it. Yes, but to Dorley's question, you know, if a client does not file taxes as a community partner, can we still help deduct expenses from their gross income? And the answer is yes. So if they're self-employed, helping them to look at what their expenses are for their business and helping them deduct those, as well as if there's anything that they could deduct if they were to file taxes, you can absolutely help them with that. Of course, the more support or resources that folks have available, if they happen to have their tax return from last year of what they did for their self-employment or other deductions that they've done in the past, that's super helpful, but it's not necessarily a barrier if they have not filed taxes.
Thank you, Sean.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and move forward, guys. And I know there's some other great questions in here. Really, really good ones. I really appreciate it, guys. I just want to make sure we're moving through. So, and I know I'm covering the expense section quickly. Honestly, we could do an hour, probably an hour presentation on just expenses themselves. So if that is an interest for folks, for us to spend more time really talking about these expenses in detail and the tax deduction in detail, let us know, and we can always work on tailoring more trainings in the future for folks as well. It's hard to find a topic that we can cover and not cover everything in just an hour. So do the best we can. All right, and then just to kind of continue Olivia's example through the application for someone that has self-employment income, the last place that we would be entering their income would be under the annual income section. We spent quite a lot of time covering the annual income test and why it's there, the reason why it's there, why it's 100% FPL, that folks need to file taxes in order to be run through the annual income test, and that folks need to file married filing jointly in order to go through the annual income test. If folks have questions about that, please refer back to our training that we did earlier this month. The recordings are at the end of this training. We did, I think, a decent job of going through that. And if folks have questions, please follow up. But just want to remember, as we know, the information as you guys enter the income throughout the application does not automatically get entered into the annual income area, which is where we need to help support clients and work with them on calculating that annual income. This is where you would put all earned income, Social Security benefits. So one thing I did see a question about supplemental security income. Did we want to cover that at all, or I wonder if that one got covered, because I know someone was saying that in the past folks didn't necessarily put in supplemental security benefits, but it is required now. That would be entered in the other income section, but not necessarily in this area in annual deductions. And it does have a little in this question box in this note, it just says did not include supplemental security income in this annual income section. I don't know if Christy, I know it's a little bit confusing that it gets entered in one place and not another. If we want to provide any extra context there, and I apologize for diverging from the topic a little bit, but I remember seeing that question.
Sean, I am more than happy to answer. I only caught half of it because I was reading a question and trying to answer it in chat. Can you tell me again? Can you repeat your question for me again? Thank you.
Worries. I remember seeing in the chat here, and we may have answered this one already. Someone was asking about supplemental security income and whether that needs to be reported in the one application.
Yes, it absolutely does. Now, for those community partners and even applicants, right, who applied for medical in the MAGI, what we call the MAGI 1 system, that was before the integrated eligibility system, there was text on there to not report supplemental security income, SSI, which is one form of a Social Security payment, right? So now that we're in an integrated system, other programs, including non-MAGI, of course, right, they do count that supplemental security income. So in the monthly income screen, so those are the screens that come before this annual income screen, right, where you're entering in those monthly amounts, and maybe even if they're received on an annual basis, you mark that. You will tell us about the supplemental security income. When you get to this screen and the annual income, and in fact, I think there is text at the top of this screen that says, do not enter supplemental security income. So you would not include that on this screen. You do, however, include Social Security benefits, so those that are received for retirement or widows, spouses and children of somebody who has passed away. Those are the Social Security benefits, and the SSDI, which is the income that people are receiving from Social Security based on their disability. All of that those things would be included on this annual income screen.
Perfect.
Did I answer the question, Sean?
That is fantastic, Christy. Thank you.
Okay.
That subtle nuance, and so I just wanted to make sure that we did cover that because. And I agree, Christine did ask as well, and I know that this is something that the policy team also wants to make sure that we cover too. And we were going to try and cover Social Security benefits in this training today, but just didn't quite have the capacity with the short time that we had. But I really, Christine, I think doing a Social Security benefits webinar and how to enter that information, how to collect information is absolutely on our radar, and would be a topic that we are wanting to help provide more information on. If hopefully that will be helpful to you all. Okay. Wonderful, guys. All right, so I'll just go through for our particular example for Olivia, how we might enter that information into our example. So we worked with Olivia, we talked to her about all of the types of income sources that she had. We found out that she, just had her Uber job. So we put the annual income. I know that was a bit of a hang up for folks on our last training. So I'm not going into the detail of the math today. So I always just recommend help community members as best as possible to calculate an accurate annual income, recognizing, and we recognize that annual income will continue to fluctuate throughout the year. So as they report changes, help them update that annual income. If they, say a decrease in their hours or an increase in hours, a change of job, we want to make sure to include all income that the person has had throughout that year. And then for their expenses, we took the 300 and help Olivia calculate an annual income. You'll want to check with Olivia, say, hey, Olivia, does this sound close to an annual income for you? Does this look like roughly what your expenses will look like? And if they say yes, then we'll go ahead and help them enter that information. If not, work with them to support them to get that information as accurately as possible. But I didn't want to, like our last time, kind of get too hung up in the details on that income calculation. I think different folks have different ways to approach it, and we just want to help folks do that as best as possible. So as our final kind of key takeaway for today with annual income is just we'll make sure that we want to annual income test can only be used for people who file taxes. Individuals who file taxes as married filing separately cannot be determined eligible using the annual income test. When we're looking at income calculations, we want to look at the full calendar year. So we would ask Olivia, have you had any other jobs since April? If no, then we wouldn't add anything else. If we do, we help them calculate that information. It can be really helpful if folks say they had a past job that they don't have right now, to always say if they bring their last pay stub from that past job and work with them to calculate how much and look at what was their income up until that point and use that as a support system to enter that information into the annual income test. And we recognize that it's a best estimate. Folks' income changes constantly, and we want to do the best we can to help them calculate that annual income. All right, and so I'm going to pass things back off to Rosie. We're trying to move through things to make sure that we have time to answer questions and do a Q&A today. So I apologize if things are moving a little quickly, but I'm going to pass things off to Rosie just to do a high-level overview of responding to income RFIs.
Hey, thanks, John. I think we will have a little bit of time to do a Q&A. So let's do a quick review, high-level overview on responding to income RFIs. So if we go to the next slide. All right, so a request for information will generate when an applicant or member has missing information and needs to provide additional verification documentation. So here's an example of a request for information. The screen will show the applicant's program that they're applying for, the type of information that the request for information, the name of the person for the RFI has generated for, and this is very important. It will give you a date the information is needed by. You as a community partner can assist applicants and members in extending this date of request for information if, let's say, there's a hardship in getting verification documentation and the applicant member is needing more time to provide that information. One thing to also remember when assisting an applicant or member in extending this due date is that you must make this request for an extension prior to the due date. So the due date on this example we have is July 3rd, 2023. We would want to make sure that we are requesting that extension prior to July 3. Now, if we're submitting an initial application, we want to ensure that we are not uploading any other documentation with the initial application. Once a request for information is generated, though, through the One Applicant portal, we want to go back to the applicant's case, click on Upload button, and upload the verification documentation if it's readily available to upload. So that's just a really brief overview of the request for information. Our final takeaways on the next slide is, we want to get as accurate information as possible when coding the applicants and members' income and estimating their annual income. So if you go to the next slide, Sean.
Hey, Rosie, before we move on, I think we got a good question about RFIs from Susan. Do you mind if I read that one out real quick?
Me too, yeah.
So it says, Susan asked, if there is a request for information for income, but the income in the system is not current, should we submit an RFI with an explanation or update the case by submitting a change and then see if it still is asking for an RFI? And let me know if you want me to tackle that one at all.
Yeah, I'm going to go back and read it again. So so as we mentioned, so it sounds like the applicant portal generated that request for information, correct? We need to yes, we need to submit the RFI with an explanation. But but then the income is incorrect. Okay, so I wonder why the system is, if the income is incorrect, we will need to update that income on the One Applicant portal. And if there is a request for information, we would want to upload any documentation that the member is providing to suffice that request for information. So,
Hey, Rosie, I'll just add one extra piece to that. Sometimes when you guys do an application and policy, feel free to chime in if there's anything that you want to add here, is that the information that that when we go to check someone's current income, especially for folks that maybe have a W-2 and have pay stubs, we're going to be looking historically at their income. So they may have had a recent change of hours or recent change of income. So when you're helping someone go through an application, if they submit their hours and income and that's been a change from the past, there may be a request for information if it's not quite matching our system, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's incorrect. We're just getting a more accurate interpretation of what the client's income is currently. And as always, and we always recommend this, if there is room for an explanation, or to say, hey, the client's had a drop in hours, that's why, please see attached pay stubs, or please see a written statement from the client explaining the change in their income. The more information, the better, the clearer we can be. It really, really helps our staff on the back end make sure that they get all the information they need to complete that request for information. So hopefully that's helpful. And I don't know if, oh yeah, oh, Christy, looks like you want to chime in, so go for it.
Some of this stuff was similar to what you're saying. I want to make it clear to the question though, is that you should not try to clear the RFI by simply updating the applicant portal with new information. Once the RFI is generated, the only way we can clear it is for a worker to get the verification. And when they process it, they will update the amounts correctly at that time. So the answer to the question really is just respond to the RFI at that point. So it also goes to reason, stands to reason, I guess, that that's partly why we always encourage people to report changes timely, keep their cases updated, so that when we do run a renewal batch, for instance, and put them through automated renewals, it doesn't generate RFIs unnecessarily, and we are using the most accurate information to run the renewals against.
Perfect. Thank you, Christy. And then Rosie, before I hand it back, I think that last question too from Mary is a good one to cover.
Mm-hmm.
And so one thing that we wanted, okay, so I'll just clarify. So when we're guys, when you're doing an application or helping someone, say virtually or remotely, the one document that we definitely want you to upload in those circumstances is a signed consent form that indicates that you worked with the person virtually. But the reason why we don't want you guys to upload information if an RFI is not generated is once information's uploaded, it creates a task for folks within our eligibility team and our processing center. They have to go and pull that information. And if there's no reason for that information to be uploaded, we just want to make sure that we're only uploading information that's requested, especially going through the redetermination period. We're going to have a lot of backlog of work. So please only upload information if it's requested. If you do feel like something needs to be clarified, you could maybe follow up with an email if you really do feel like something's necessary. But with the One Applicant portal, I'd say other than the consent form, if there's no RFI, please don't upload information. Hopefully that helps, Mary.
Yeah, that was well explained, Sean. But yeah, hopefully, Mary, do you have additional questions? Nope, thank you. Okay.
Awesome. Perfect. All right. Okay, I'll move us forward.
Great, thank you so much. All right, so as I mentioned, that was a brief overview of RFI. So final takeaways, as I mentioned, we want to get as accurate information as possible when coding the applicant or the member's income and estimating their annual income. We want to encourage you to ask open-ended questions, again, having those organic conversations to help applicants and members figure out their income. We don't want to create barriers or turn people away for not having pay stubs or income verification. So again, going back to those open-ended questions, inquiring about their current income situation. And we want to ensure that we are not uploading any documentation. I think we just talked a little bit about that with the initial application. However, once eligibility is run, and if there is a request for information that is generated through the One Applicant portal, we do want to go back to the applicant's case, click on the upload button, and upload the verification documentation then, but not prior or with the initial application. As Sean mentioned, we do, if it's remotely, if you're assisting a member remotely, we do want to make sure that you're uploading those consent forms with that initial application. And with that, I believe we are having some room for a Q&A session. So I know you guys asked wonderful questions. How do we want to go about answering those questions, Sean?
Yeah, I am not quite sure. I know folks on the back end have been going through and answering things as they've been going. I'm not sure if Christy or Janelle, if there is any particular ones that you want to make sure that we cover kind of vocally. If there's any that you wanted to go over, that would be great. If not, I can try and take a look at some of the ones that have come through. I know that we have some that are not necessarily pertaining to this self-employment, but some really great questions, and I'd like to try and answer as much as possible. Oh yeah, so it looks like you want to add some information about child support. Go for it, Christy.
Yes, hi, this is Christy Garland. I wonder if Rosie or Sean, I'm not sure who's driving the slide deck, if you might be able to go back to the slide that shows the expense screen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. I'll wait until you get there because I'm very visual and it will help me speak to it as well.
Sorry, let me go back to expenses. Okay, this one here.
There it is. Thank you. Yep. Thank you so much. So there's quite a few questions about child support expenses. I think one was about income as well. So I just want to give some broad information that I hope gets to most, if not all of those questions in the chat. So first, I just want to give a brief overview. This expense screen is not just used for MAGI determinations. It's also used for non-MAGI, and some of these are for other programs that, SNAP, TANF, ERDC, so the food benefit, child cash, and child care. So this expense screen, the person should say any expenses that they have, right? So there's all of the medical, child support, alimony support, and education expenses. Just so you know what the system functionality is. All of those questions and screens are used by non-MAGI and the other programs. That being said, it's pretty complicated behind the scenes because non-MAGI might not consider every single expense listed on all of those screens. But I'm just telling you that those are all for non-MAGI and other programs. The deductions one that has the box around it on this screenshot is only the questions and the amounts and things listed on that screen in particular are only used for MAGI. So I'm telling you that because you want to make sure you answer all of those questions, yes or no, just as the person is telling you. You don't want to answer them into regard of, oh, do they have those first ones? Is it a tax expense? Just do they have medical expenses, right? And so you'd answer the question, does any elderly, blind, disabled, or refugee as a yes or no and go through. So there are, and then you get to the deductions question. And then when you click next out of that screen, depending on which questions you've answered yes or no to, right, the additional screens will open and ask some more details about that. That deduction screen specifically, as Sean mentioned earlier, is about tax deductions. And that's going to be used just for the MAGI program. And so that's why when you're entering expenses, you need to enter them in multiple different places to ensure that all programs that the person is potentially eligible for have all of the information about income and expenses that it needs. So there's also the self-employment screen that collects information about expenses. So again, you're entering the information just as the system is asking about it, and the system then will use all of that information to get to an eligibility determination. So to the self-employment, now I'm going to bring it back to their self-employment expenses and income questions in the chat. So you want to tell us about all child support income. Those are on the previous screens previous to this screen that you get to, but tell us all about the child support income that is being received. And then any expenses that the person has, like they're paying out child support, you would answer yes on this screen to child support expenses. Does anyone in your household pay child support? You would mark yes to. Thank you for, I'm doing that with my finger. Thank you for using the mouse to do that. So you'd answer yes there. And then additionally, if that child support expense can be deducted on the tax return, you would mark yes. That being said, I think there are extremely limited circumstances, if any. The rules are changing all the time with tax filing, but very extremely limited, if any, instances where it can be deducted on the tax return. But if the person has that available, then you would also mark yes in the deduction. And then the additional screens that open up, because you've marked that, you'll answer the questions in those screens about that child support or tax expense as applicable. Okay, please enter if that, hopefully that helped at least some people, but if you have additional questions, please put them in the chat and we'll try to get to those.
Awesome. Thank you, Christy. I really appreciate it. And I'll go back just to the Q&A slide, just so that we have that up. I know some of the folks that were on the call today thought that this training might be about the Magi Expanded Adult Program. I do apologize if that was any of you guys. I mean, I'm glad you're here regardless, because hopefully you did learn something new today. But our team did have to move some trainings around. And so that one actually occurred earlier this month. Oh, perfect. Indiana posted information about it as well. And just as a reminder for all the folks, when I send out the slide deck today, all of the recordings, so the Magi Expanded Adult Program recording is available in group site, and it is also linked here for all of our past trainings as well. And we also did add some of the PHE Unwinding Provider trainings, just as an overview of all the changes that are happening for both SNAP as well as medical benefits as well. Okay. Going through, looks like some of the questions are being flagged, which is great. Let's see. For individuals that don't have a social ID, it's always required to be submitted.
I'm flagging as I go, but yes, I have seen the policy has done a great job answering to quite a bit of them already.
And I apologize, Rosie, I didn't do the best job of kind of seeing things going as we're going through to cover in the end here, but is there any that you think we should spend some time talking out loud about?
You know, there was a question on like uploading additional verification if it's requested or once the applicant portal generates an RFI. And someone asked if it takes a week or more to get that information, how should you upload? So again, going back to that member's case, so let's say the member doesn't have that income verification or additional verification that the system is requesting, and they come back to you a week, 2 weeks from now, you can just log into their case and then upload that information within their case. And it should be readily, if it's readily available, it'll create a task for an eligibility worker to complete that task and clear that penned.
And that's great, Rosie. And I agree, there are lots of different ways that clients can help complete that request for information if they don't have that information at the time of the application. You can also, if a client is doing their best and they're attempting to get proof or information to provide, and they're unable to, you can always, and the client can always reach out and ask for an extension if they need support with that. That is something that I know has happened for immigration documentation in the past when folks have struggled to get updated versions, or they lost a document and are still waiting to get an updated version. So it's always good for folks to ask. Just because there's a due date on there, that doesn't mean that there isn't an opportunity for us to work with the client and support them and get them extra time. Other great ways, clients can always if they have their RFI and they can't meet with you, they can always go into a storefront office, an ODHS office to submit information. And there also is going to be the new One Applicant Portal phone app, where folks can actually upload documents directly themselves for request for information via their phone. And we'll have more information on that in the future. We just went through testing this last month. And so that will give community members another tool to be able to upload information themselves as well. Okay. All right, guys. Well, I think okay. So I think at this point, I'll go ahead and just pause on questions. We have about 5 minutes left. I want to let you guys know about the other resources that are in the training here. And then the last thing that I would ask is that our team wants to continue to do these income trainings, but we want to continue to tailor it to your guys' needs. So in the chat, if you guys, in the questions box, if you are able to type in any particular income that you want to learn more about, ones that have really stumped you or you've needed support on in the past, you want to learn more about, please put that in the questions box. With these last few minutes, I'll talk about some of the resources that we have available and what's coming up next, so that we can continue to tailor this. I know someone asked for us to do training on Social Security benefits. That's absolutely great. We will make sure to do that. But if there's any others, such as like gifts or in kind, things like, oh, go for it.
Oh, sorry. I thought I lost you for a minute. I'm like, I think we lost Sean, but you came back. So.
Oh, sorry. I know my internet's been a little clunky. Did folks hear my ask about more information on income? Okay, perfect. I'm seeing a few come in through. Great.
And I know we have like 3 minutes left, Sean, but I do want to, I have this question here is just really quickly, if the applicant is self-employed and do not have an ITIN or Social Security number, can we use a self-certification of income from the applicants as proof? I don't know if self-certification is that.
Probably self-attestation, I think, might be what.
I'm thinking. I don't know if policy would like to share a little bit on that for a member or an applicant if that's self-employed, does not currently have an ITIN or Social Security number.
Hey, this is Christy Garland. I guess I don't understand what the question is. That if somebody is self-employed and they do not have an ITIN or Social Security number, they should still tell us about the Social Security income for sure, and any deductions that would be allowed if they were filing taxes. And then if an RFI is issued for it, then they can provide whatever proof that they have necessary, or whatever proof that they have. Does that answer the question? I'm sorry if I didn't understand the question.
Yeah, I think the question is more like because they don't have any type of proof for that income, would would it be okay to? And again, I think it is going to be okay to have that conversation with them on self-employment, expenses, deductions, code that on the system. If the system does generate an RFI, then we'll have an additional conversation with the member in helping them code the correct income, but they should definitely continue reporting that self-employment and expenses to you.
Yes, agreed, absolutely. And just as for everybody, whether they file taxes or not, or have a Social Security number or not, they should be telling us about the income that we receive. And there are options if we ask for it, for proof of what can be provided. It does not always have to be a tax document, right? So there are other things, and I think they were actually listed on the screen, or Sean talked about them. But even just a calendar with amounts written down, or a ledger, or client statement if they absolutely just don't have anything at all. So we can definitely work with people, and what those requirements are the same for whether they have filed taxes or not, have a Social Security number or not. It's just what would be available for them to provide as proof might be different.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. All right, and I do see some more awesome questions coming through and some great topics for us to cover in the next time. If it kind of were questions that pertain to some of the topics we covered today, we weren't able to answer them right now, we'll definitely go ahead and do a follow-up FAQ and we got some great topics to cover for next time. So I really appreciate folks adding those in. I hope you guys found today helpful and learned something today. As of kind of a final wrap up and reminder, we've added all of the past recordings that we've done recently here. You can, I'll make sure to send those after later today or tomorrow morning. And then we do have continued upcoming trainings as well. We're going to be doing transition to marketplace training coming up in May 2nd. Circumstances and I apologize, and the circumstances on when OHP may end, and then on June 7th, circumstances when OHP, I apologize, that's the English and Spanish, my brain today. So those are the two next topics, are transitioning to marketplace and circumstances when OHP may end. So please make sure to keep these registrations on your calendar so you can attend the next one. Again, there's always going to be the first Tuesday of the month is our modules, and the fourth Wednesday of the month are our one learning series, and that's what we're going to be continuing to use. Again, thank you so much, guys, for being here. Rosie and our subject matter expert team, thank you for taking the time to help answer questions and being a great partner. Folks, if you want to hang on for a couple minutes and add that last question you were trying to type in, feel free. If you didn't have time today, please follow up and email your ROC and let them know. We can always support you guys one-on-one. Other than that, we are completed for our training today. I'll go ahead and close out our recording. And I really appreciate y'all for being here.